We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
What's Pro Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady. We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Do you not understand that they are that way because you're Joe Flacco?
And you just like to discredit things that people deserve credit for.
That you can't possibly be expected to defend that.
Talk about the game, Sam. So who cares about what people think about us?
Yeah, I like football season, all the things that go with it.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We are live here on YouTube, and we're live in your ears in podcast land here.
Live in your ears.
That's right. It's live. We're here. We're reviewing every draft class. Started with the NFC West and East. We did that on Sunday, so go check that out if you haven't already. Today, it's about the AFC East and West, Sam. Ready to go?
You're just starting in weird orders all over the place.
Well, the West always goes last. We always seem to get the West last. North and South will go last.
So you're making them this time go first and third.
They're going first.
First and last show, and then first in this show,
First
which is
and
the
third.
third division we've covered.
First and third. All right, do you want to start with the West or the East on this show?
We have to go with the West because you already set that precedent.
That's how we named it?
Yeah.
All right, we'll start with AFC West. By the way, if you're watching live on YouTube, only if you're watching live, I can confirm that the Draft 30 promo code is still live as well. Draft 30, 30%
if you're
off.
Watching or listening on Tuesday, May the 4th, it's still good. If you're listening on any other day,
yes,
not.
And if you're listening on Tuesday, now I will do what I can to try to convince the powers that be that they can perhaps extend the promo code. But as of right now, we are stopping it today on May the 4th. Draft 30, 30% off all of your PFF subscriptions. I do suggest you go right now and get that. So we're letting the people show up to the YouTube stream, but let's get into this. AFC West draft review.
Wait, before we do that,
yeah,
I keep forgetting to mention this, so I have to do it now. You have been rocking this thing on your head for however long that is, whatever you call that.
My hair.
Yeah, which Eric refers to as the standard Jerry curl. I'm sure there's a technical name for whatever it is you call it, but anyway, that's been your go-to. But back in the day, you have rocked a full-on fro. And
I have.
Critically, you have said that you would be willing to do that again for one episode of the PFF podcast if we raised $1,000 for charity.
Yes.
So I have a GoFundMe set up.
Yeah.
And right now, as of recording, we are $360 towards our $1,000 goal. This is a slam dunk. It's 2 for 1. You're helping people out, and you're getting to see Steve rock an afro on the show. Frankly, the link is there. It's the pinned tweet on my Twitter.
It's pinned for you?
Pinned
Okay.
on my Twitter. Go there, help us raise $1,000 for charity so that Steve, in a show soon, will have to rock a full-on, picked out afro.
Yeah, I can. I haven't done it in a while, but I can legitimately get the monster afro
And
going.
I think also that will help answer some questions about what that hairline is doing. You've been fighting hard against this idea that it's retreating, back.
It's not retreating. I
like
have tons
Napoleon,
of hair.
But I'm telling you, I think when when it all comes out, when you undo the moose, I think you're going to see some disturbing trend.
Yeah, when you first brought this up, you were like, "Hey, what would it take for you to do this?" I just said $1,000.
Yeah.
You said, "All right, deal. I'm going to get the $1,000 together." And then I said, "Obviously, I'm not just going to take $1,000. I will put it toward." So it's going toward a place called Heritage House, which is here in Cincinnati, which helps helps men fight addiction of all kinds, a lot of heroin and opioid addiction, something I'm connected to. So I'm excited to do that, and I'm more than willing to pick out my hair for that. I'll even I'm going to match the $1,000 too. Once we get that, I will match it because I like having money go to this to Heritage House. So I want that to happen. I don't care if I look silly. I might look great. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but it'll be good. It'll be good for a show.
Yeah. I wouldn't set your hopes on that one. Let's just put it that way.
It's Sam's pinned tweet. I've retweeted it a couple times, and if you guys want to help out and contribute and see me with my picked out monster afro,
yes.
I think it's going to happen now that we finally announced it on the show.
I mean, this should push it over the edge.
So every little bit helps to get us there. All right, so let's get to the AFC West. Let's start with the Denver Broncos. Okay, Denver Broncos. The biggest news of this entire weekend is that they were tied to Aaron Rodgers. And I don't know how much this tied into their draft strategy.
But has that been confirmed how real that was? Because all hell broke loose. The Aaron Rodgers thing happened. Everyone's like, oh, he's out of there. Teams are calling. And then Mark Schlereth went on the radio and said, this is almost a done deal with Denver. Like, they have it in place. It's as close as it can get without being a confirmed deal or whatever it was, his actual wording was. But basically, Denver's getting Aaron Rodgers was the point. And this was later, I mean, obviously they didn't get him, so step one against that statement. But other people have since come out and said, I mean, it hasn't happened. It isn't tremendously close. There haven't been extensive discussions. The Packers have said they rebuffed like one phone call, which the 49ers have admitted to making. So unless they're lying about the numbers, this Denver thing has not been anywhere near as close to fruition as certainly Mark Schlereth said it was. Now, I do, though, think that, A, like you said, that might have changed their entire draft strategy, and B, it's also how this draft class needs to be framed or looked through the prism of. Because when you look at this draft class, if you just look at the players, I think they've done a really good job. Like, I like the players they've acquired with this draft class. I think in isolation it's extremely good, but they didn't come out of this class with a quarterback. So right now, Drew Lock is still the starting quarterback, or Teddy Bridgewater, which isn't any better. It only makes sense if they're getting Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I'm with you on the player thing. I mean, I like the players. Yeah, they traded up for a running back in the second round.
That's not ideal. But,
the Patrick Surtain thing in the first round is just fascinating because we always say you can never have too many corners. Well, we're going to test that theory in Denver. Now, I had a theory on the Rodgers thing, which was the cap hit for the Packers is so much greater here pre-June 1st. And if they trade him post-June 1st, it's an easier cap hit. It's easier to move him.
Only the dead cap.
What's that?
Only the dead cap.
The dead cap hit, yeah.
So it actually doesn't change that much in terms of like actual salary cap or that kind of stuff. It's really a case of when you want to take that dead hit. Do you want to take it all this year, or do you want to split it half now, or not half, but some this year and some next year?
Yeah, I assume you'd want to split it is the point, right?
But the thing is, you're already committed to that money, right? Because the budget was for Aaron Rodgers to be on the roster. So and you're not going to be moving Aaron Rodgers now, you're not going to be panicking going out and finding another quarterback. So you don't have to find like another $30 million, right? It doesn't really change their allocation of the money. The guy that would be replacing Rodgers is already on the roster. That's already accounted for. And Rodgers is already on the roster and already accounted for. So in a way, it makes more sense to just take all the pain now, get it done, and then next year when you're figuring out what you're committing to in terms of Jordan Love or another option, you actually have more flexibility with an extra $10 million of space.
I don't like the comment section.
No?
That Mike Quinn is dropping into our chat here.
Stoking?
Not happy.
Oh.
Not happy with it.
What's
Stop
it
making
say?
fun of me,
Let's see.
everybody. Anyway, how much? So if you look at Denver's, nobody had Denver taking a corner here. Why? Because this offseason they brought in Kyle Fuller and Ronald Darby, and they already have Bryce Callahan playing the slot, who is one of the most underrated corners in the entire league. Is fantastic, right? So technically they're locked in with their top three. Mm-hmm. Then they draft Patrick Surtain, our number one corner on the board. So we will test that theory of loading up on corners and that strategy and the whole thing. However, at the time I was thinking, well, Green Bay, their biggest need is corner. were they taking Surtain with the idea of trading him at some point to Aaron Rodgers? Now, of course, Green Bay drafts Eric Stokes in the first round. They also can't have too many corners over there either, but Patrick Surtain and Jair Alexander, that would at least be a nice little consolation for Green Bay if they did have to get rid of Aaron Rodgers. Assume they'd probably have another first rounder or two added to the mix. So yeah, through this Denver lens of who's the quarterback, you do have to view the draft. Then you also say, okay, well, then why did they not get Justin Fields? Is it an evaluation thing? And I thought that the Teddy Bridgewater trade said maybe we don't have the best evaluation on Justin Fields. I also said it shouldn't keep the Broncos from drafting a quarterback, but I also said it could indicate they're just saying, well, we definitely don't want Drew Lock to be our starter. If our top 3 or 4 quarterbacks are off the board, we don't want 4 or 5, say. So therefore, we're going to have to hedge, get Teddy Bridgewater, maybe they were all in on Trey Lance. And if Trey Lance fell, they would take him. But clearly, they weren't in enough on Justin Fields or Mac Jones to take either quarterback at 9, and I think that's why the Teddy Bridgewater trade happened.
Yeah, I'm torn on that as a concept because, I've been saying pre-draft that we act like this is a 5 quarterback draft. There's 5 guys expected to go high in the first round. Just get one. If you need a quarterback, go get one of those 5, and it doesn't matter which. But we were making the point all the time that NFL teams are not going to agree on that. There are going to be teams that have this as a 2 quarterback class. Philadelphia sounded like they were interested if they could have got Zach Wilson, but once it became clear that he was going to go number 2, Philly was out. They didn't like 3, 4, 5. They would prefer to roll with Jalen Hurts this year and figure it out next year. And I suspect that's true for a bunch of other teams, that they don't view this as a 5 quarterback class. They view it as a 2, a 3, or 4 quarterback class. So in a way, you say, okay, that makes sense. Denver, maybe they like Trey Lance. Maybe they only like the top 2. Either way, once the quarterbacks that were potentially attainable for them, they didn't want. So I guess you can say, yeah, it's right to trust that instinct and move on and fix other positions, even ones that you think you're well set at. On the other hand, your quarterback is Drew Lock. At some point, you have to just say, we don't have a huge amount of faith in this guy, but he's probably a better shot at panning out than Drew Lock is at this point. So let's grab him. And even if he isn't, even if it's the same chance, it's 2 unlikely people to pan out, which is better than 1 unlikely person to pan out. At some point, if you're Denver...
Can you rerun the math on that? Is that true?
At some point, if you're Denver, you're just so desperate for an upgrade at quarterback, you have to do something, even if it's grabbing a guy that you're not 100% enamored with in the first round. That's why I think unless they're going to somehow grind down Green Bay or throw an offer at them that's too good to turn down, it just feels that this entire draft is almost invalidated because they still have Drew Lock as their starting quarterback.
I know. We could discuss the quarterback part forever. I want to talk about the Broncos and their roster and what they did from a draft standpoint. I will say, if they're trying to attract Aaron Rodgers, this roster is looking good. If we're talking, Aaron Rodgers allegedly said he'd go to Denver, Las Vegas with the Raiders, or San Francisco. San Francisco's obviously they were appealing before they drafted Trey Lance. Have Kyle Shanahan.
Wasn't Vegas also on Russell Wilson's wish list? What is it about Vegas that's...
I don't know. Is it a Gruden thing? Or is it just be the face of Vegas as the NFL moves there?
Maybe that. Yeah, I don't...
Money opportunities.
Doesn't seem like a tremendously...
Gambling addictions. I don't know.
That could be it. Just look, it's a pain in the ass to place these bets where I am right now. If I go to Vegas, I can just roll out of bed, wander down to the book, and then we go.
That's definitely why Russ wanted to be there, right? You picture Russ. Yeah. Russ is just, 23 hours straight
on the Bellagio, 24/7
on the slots. This is the one. I got this.
Yeah.
Anyway, Denver's a really good landing spot. We talk all the time about their receivers: Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, Cortland Sutton, the great Tim Patrick.
The great.
He's restricted free agent tender still to sign, but potential trade candidate given how loaded they are.
Albert. Oh, there's just
Noah Fant, right? And then they drafted Javonte Williams at 35 overall. They did trade up for him, but Javonte was our number 1 running back on the draft board. Forces missed tackles at a higher rate than any running back that has come out since we started doing this in 2014. That's actually played in the NFL. So Javonte, he had some tackle breaking ability. It's a loaded offense. Quinn Miners, the D3 interior offensive lineman that they get, at number 98 overall. He could step in and play center, at some point. We'll see how quickly he can transition. But Lloyd Cushenberry was the biggest weakness on their offensive line last year as a rookie with a 40 grade.
And probably be better than Lloyd Cushenberry.
Probably has to be. So you get a running back that will play, a center that can play. Jamar Johnson, we had him much higher. He went in the fifth round. I can see sixth round. I can see fifth round. We can see the NFL absolutely hating him. Some of the worst tackle attempts you'll ever see, but free safety ball skills, kind of like a Malik Hooker.
Yeah.
Add that to the mix. And then Surtain. I mean, Surtain, Darby, and Fuller, and Callahan, this is the whole, we're drafting to beat the Kansas City Chiefs type of strategy here.
Like I said, just in terms of the players they got, I think that's a fantastic draft and one of the best drafts of anybody in the NFL. But it just raises the question of what is your solution at quarterback? And, is there a chance you think – so two questions. One, is there a chance that they're actually going to roll into the season with Drew Lock as the starting quarterback again and see how that pans out? And two, is there a chance that Drew Lock turns it around like a Josh Allen, right? That if they give him enough time and they actually go back old school style and say, look, quarterbacks take 3 years to develop. Let's give this guy 3 years and see where it works out. Are we writing off Drew Lock prematurely, fresh off evidence in Josh Allen that can happen, right? You can turn around a guy if you put the situation around him as we've been saying for years, right? That Buffalo has done a fantastic job of building around Josh Allen. Denver has done a hell of a job building around their quarterback. It's just they haven't seen any returns from it yet.
The two arguments I make in favor of Drew Lock turning it around, the fact that he's only had a season's worth of snaps, I'll come back to that in a minute. And the fact that all 4 years at Missouri, he did get better. I mean, he started out as one of the worst quarterbacks in the nation as a true freshman. A lot of true freshmen struggle, and he got better.
Can I give you one more?
And better. What's that?
Can I give you one more?
Sure.
Guy's got a career big-time throw rate of 5.5%, 6.5 last year.
So you like the high-end stuff.
He actually, he makes big plays. It's just that he's also been consistently 4.5% of turnover-worthy plays. Got to figure out how to get rid of those. Otherwise, it's a no-go.
Did you just Jameis argument him? Did you just give the Jameis argument?
Yeah. I'm saying that
there's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad.
If you don't cut those out, it's never going to happen, which is the Jameis point, right? That's why he's currently Tamus as opposed to, rocking his own team somewhere as an undisputed number one and whatever. If you can't cut those out, it's never going to happen. But at some point early in the career, if a guy's got a profile like that, you can say, all right, let's see if we can work this out, which is why Jameis kept getting all those chances, which is why every year you were like, this is Jameis's year. Because initially you can talk yourself into that. If we can just cut those down, if we can just halve the number of catastrophic decisions he's making, then we're cooking. But at some point, there becomes a line where you're like, all right, that's just never going to happen. That's just who he is, and we're not getting rid of those plays.
Somebody's already asking about the hoodie in the mentions. I will mention it is from Sweat Taylor. They did outfit us the entire weekend. Sweat Taylor, SWET, Sweat Taylor. And we have a promo code. I'll mention it a little bit later on too, but the promo code's PFF-SWEAT, SWET, 25% off. That's PFF-SWET, 25% off at sweattailor.com. Sweat spelled the same way, SWET, sweattailor.com.
What were they asking about the hoodie?
Nice hoodie. Where do I get one?
Oh,
Sweattailor.com was the answer. Promo code PFF for 25% off. Why wouldn't you do that? It is pretty comfy, and they did take care of us this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
I had one more point on the lock stuff as well, but then I forget it as well.
Okay.
But it's surrounding this 1 year of data. Okay, so Josh Allen broke out in year 3.
Mm-hmm.
There's a handful of quarterbacks we've also seen struggle in year 1 and break out in year 2. So technically it's the third year for Lock, but he only started 6 games his first season. So Jared Goff was kind of in the same boat. His breakout season did happen in year 2, but Goff was horrible as a rookie. Derek Carr wasn't very good as a rookie. His second season was much better. Blake Bortles, for whatever it's worth, did show improvement in years 2 and 3. So there are guys who do take steps forward after that first year of work.
Matthew Stafford had one of the worst rookie seasons we've ever seen.
He's another one, had a terrible. So could Drew Lock be better? And let's just define better too. As a 63.5 grade last year, even if you just get that to 70, if Judy is open as much as we think he will be, and Hamler's used correctly with Cortland Sutton coming back and Fant and all these playmakers we talk about, if you're a 70 to 75 PFF grade, this offense is moving the ball. So there is this world where Locke is fine. But I do think Aaron Rodgers is the best play here. If you can get him, if you can get him in.
I'm not disputing that, but I'm saying that right now we have no idea if Denver is even remotely interested in Aaron Rodgers. It's just really that link came from A, Mark Schlereth's report, which seems fairly debunked at this point, and B, the fact that they didn't draft a quarterback in the first round, which may be an indication that they're working on Aaron Rodgers, or maybe an indication, as you said, that they just didn't like the options that they had. Now, it's also curious, again, that they didn't even come back in the second or third round, right? They didn't draft a Kellen Mond or a Kyle Trask or a Davis Mills. They didn't take a quarterback. They weren't in the market for an upgrade of quarterbacks. Now, it would be fairly mind-blowing to me if you can come out of last season and be with the conclusion that, yeah, Drew Lock's still the guy. We still believe. Now, okay, we'll bring over Teddy to be a bit of a mentor and teach him the ropes, but still Drew Lock's team. I cannot get my head around how Denver, of all teams, with the desperation that they must have at that position, would sort of willingly load up again for one last shot at Drew Lock. It just seems like a low percentage play.
George Payton comes over from the Vikings. They always, Zimmer and those guys always love taking defensive backs, so it's not out of their nature, right? Mm-hmm. I really wonder, though, the Aaron Rodgers reports weren't new for everybody, but they were somewhat new. I really wonder if they just said, let's do it. What's the most attractive thing we could do if we could talk to Green Bay? Let's take a Surtain. He's the best player on the board. He fits their biggest need. Let's just take him and see. And we'll continue these trade talks because we can't sneak something through right here before the draft. Really wonder if that discussion did happen. Where else do we want to go? AFC West. Who else is in this division?
Yeah, to the other teams in the division.
The Chargers, the Raiders, and the Chiefs. Let's go Chiefs. We'll get to the Raiders soon.
God, you're out of order in divisions, out of order alphabetically. You're just...
I'm going by city. Denver, Kansas City.
Okay.
So Kansas City Chiefs continue the offensive line overhaul. They end up trading, they obviously traded their first-round pick for Orlando Brown, so that's a part of the equation. Their first-rounder goes to Orlando Brown. All the other picks in that Ravens deal were essentially a wash. They get your guy. You could just wax poetic about Nick Bolton right here, 58 overall, the first pick for the Chiefs in this draft.
Yeah, it's funny, draft grades and all those kinds of things. You get this debate about whether you should factor in things like where that first-round pick went. So Kansas City trading for Orlando Brown Jr., do you lump that in with their draft?
If I did, I think it's a wash. But
what do you mean?
I think it's like a C. I think it's like a C move.
Just that move?
That move itself,
okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, do you factor in the trade that they've made to acquire a veteran with the draft picks that they actually spent? I don't care either way. I'm just raising it as an interesting point.
It is true.
Look, I think Nick Bolton was a great pick. I really like him. We've been talking about how difficult it is to predict linebacker success and how those guys are just struggling generally. Nick Bolton is the kind of guy that will fall to the second round now because he's not this freaky. He doesn't have the athleticism that a Jamin Davis has, who went in the first round to Washington. He's going to slide a little bit because of that. But when you watch him play, he just looks like a much more instinctive, put together, heady linebacker. That guy understands where he should be on every single play, understands how to get there, and for as relatively unathletic as he is compared with guys like that, he doesn't get beaten by athletic players. That guy chased down and hawked Kadarius Toney in the open field a couple of times when they played Florida. Defensive backs can't do that. That was really impressive stuff. So I think he could come in and be their starter right away, potentially a better player right now than last year's draft choice, Willie Gay. Maybe that flips, as they develop and as Gay gets better. But I really like that pick. I think that's a great one.
One of my notes was reckless tackler at times, but in parentheses, maybe teams like that.
Yeah.
Which was fun with Bolton, because we've heard teams say that, I don't care if a guy misses 18 tackles. And there's an element to that where they're right. Some missed tackles are kind of forcing guys back into leverage, and they're not the worst thing in the world. But it is just funny how he does fly around the field, but he also shows that he can play under control as well and play with power and not so much power, but just technique. He does a lot of things well.
We're up to $415 now for the fro.
Oh, it's already that's
donations
great.
Are coming in.
So yeah, go check out Sam's pinned tweet, and the Afro will be coming soon.
Yes.
Apparently. Maybe we can get it by next Thursday before I get to vacation. Potentially we can do that. People are they're making fun of my head too, man. It's bad.
It's a tough day to be Steve.
They're laughing in the back at me.
Yeah.
My wife, Kelly, told me just embrace it.
Right.
I brought a hat just in case.
Well, this is what Chris says, right? The best thing you can do is, make fun of yourself, because that way you're heading it
so
off at the
much.
pass.
At some point, it's overwhelming. You're making fun of my hair and my head and my height and my weight, and
I don't make fun of your height, to be fair. I think I've been fairly on the level with the height. It is what it is. I don't mock it too much.
You got me picking out my fro.
I mean, that I'll make fun of.
Hopefully,
that's pretty funny.
Getting punched in the forehead will be gone by then. Anyway, the rest of the Chiefs draft. Creed Humphrey, they get with pick 63, their other second-round pick. So they're really going in all in. They're really going all in on the offensive line. And I'm calling it the never again. It's the never again offseason. The Chiefs have declared, never again will we see anything that looks like the Super Bowl. We will never get in there with, second and third string offensive linemen and let Pat Mahomes back there, Patrick. We'll never let him have to deal with that.
I think that's being overblown a little bit.
I don't think so.
Because you got to remember that they essentially had to cut both their starting tackles in addition to all the upheaval they were going to have anyway. Both injured, both on a lot of cash. They were the sort of moves that everybody makes in terms of a truncated or a shrunk salary cap, less money to go around than normal. Those are the kind of cost-saving moves that everybody was making. So suddenly you have an offensive line where the interior was the weakness, but the tackles were good. Now you had to get rid of both your tackles. So all of a sudden you have to change your entire offensive line. So that really is all they've done. They were in the market for Trent Williams, didn't make that happen, pivoted the money to Joe Thuney. You snag Orlando Brown in a trade. I think that's a good move, even if they overpaid. Kyle Long is a great, shot to nothing, given that he's coming out of retirement. Who knows what he'll be like. Creed Humphrey in the second round. The doctor, Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, coming back. Mike Remmer's still there. I think they've just made the number of moves they had to make when you consider that they effectively had to replace the entire offensive line. So I don't think it's necessarily this declarative statement that never again in our watch will Patrick Mahomes be getting buried under pressure because we didn't address the offensive line. It's just, oh God, we're rolling into free agency without any starting offensive linemen. We need to actually throw quite a lot at this to make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, so maybe I'm overrating it a little bit. I don't think so, though. I mean, if I'm overrating it through the lens of they've had essentially not the same offensive line, but pretty close over the last couple of years, and it hasn't been a strength. It's been good. It's been a good offensive line. Mahomes has never had a pass blocking offensive line worse than 12th. In his first 2 years, they were in the top 10. Run blocking has been middle of the pack every single year. They've been good. So maybe it's me just getting that. If I'm a Chiefs fan, it's an uneasy feeling. This happened with the Falcons a couple years ago, right? Here's this thing that hasn't been a weakness. And as a fan, you always want to feel like your team's getting better and better and better. And when you have to stop for a second and make a previous strength, you have to attack it just to get it back up to par. It does take away from the other places where they can get better.
But think about it this way. If they had just re-signed their two offensive tackles and the center, Austin Ryder, if they just re-signed those three guys and then hit Joe Thuney as a guard upgrade and then maybe drafted a depth player on the offensive line somewhere, would you be saying the same thing? Because that's essentially the same net as what they've had to do.
No, because they wouldn't have had to change, Fisher and Schwartz's contracts, right? I mean, they were getting good money, but they gave up.
But it would be the same. It's the same kind of investment because instead of one very highly paid offensive tackle in Orlando Brown, it would have been two pretty highly paid offensive tackles in Schwartz and Fisher. My point is that it's just because they had to make so many moves that it looks like this incredible declarative statement of how much they value the offensive line. But if they just done it in a different way in terms of retaining three players of their own offensive line, it wouldn't look nearly as severe, but it would represent the same volume of commitment.
No, because they also gave up a first-round pick. So it's a first-round
pick that they were going to have to spend on the offensive line anyway.
Yeah, it's a first-round pick plus Orlando Brown, who's going to get paid a year from now. So Orlando Brown, big investment. Joe Thuney, big investment. Center, you have Austin Blythe for a year, great deal, but then you have a second-round pick investment in Creed Humphrey. LDT plus Kyle Long, that's fine at right guard, and then Remmers at right tackle and Lucas Niang. So, I mean, I'm impressed with where they are. All I'm saying is a lot of their resource this offseason did go toward just keeping that as status quo, which it's going to be a top 10 offensive line. So as a fan, I'm thinking of it from a fan or as from like a did we get better from last year's standpoint. And I don't know that they did. I don't know if they got better. Are they necessary moves? Fine, but you want to be better. You want to feel better at receiver, and it's in the secondary. You want to feel better about the moves you can make going forward when you do have to make defensive line decisions and secondary decisions and the whole deal.
My point is simply that, yes, they had to throw a lot of resources at the offensive line, but I think that's simply to maintain and or slightly improve where it was. Like the offensive line lost in the fact that the Super Bowl was an absolute debacle and they got ripped to shreds in the offensive line, is that overall their offensive line has been very good for the entirety of Patrick Mahomes' career. And even last season, it was pretty good until everybody got hurt and they didn't have anybody left. And that's when it got ripped to pieces by one of the best defensive fronts in the NFL. So they had to spend a lot of resources just to maintain that pretty good offensive line. It's just that doing that required a lot of turnover with the way they elected to go about it, which makes sense when you consider that 2 of those 5 guys were injured. I think really what you're articulating is that they just put themselves in a position where whether they were going to re-sign or retain the guys they already had or create upheaval and bring in a bunch of new guys, a lot of resources were going to have to go on the offensive line this offseason anyway, which in and of itself is taking resources away from other places that they could have spent it. But I think that's just the reality of where you are when you have a quarterback that isn't getting paid peanuts anymore. Like at some point, you're going to run into an offseason where you need to do 2 things and you only have the money for one of them.
All right, the rest of their draft, there's an upside play in Joshua Kando, monster defensive end from Florida State. We'll remind Chiefs fans of Tano Passignon just a little bit. Former 5-star, never really put it together at Florida, but man, if he gets good defensive line coaching, like when his hands are right, he moves tackles backwards. So Kando, good bull rusher. Noah Gray, our guy Eric Eager watches the Chiefs closely. He said, hey, he can be tight end too, red zone threat potentially. Cornell Powell's the wild card here, 181 overall in the draft, 5th rounder. And Powell has a chance to contribute. I think he's just a good, solid receiver. I don't think he's not the best route runner. He gets off press and the whole deal. But if you're saying, hey, I want better production from like the DeMarcus Robinson role.
Yeah.
So you've got, you still have Mecole Hardman who's going to do his thing and create, be speed or whatever. But if Powell's going to be DeMarcus Robinson in this offense, he's got a chance there.
Yeah, I think he's a really interesting player. A lot of people were very high on Cornell Powell. And as you said, the DeMarcus Robinson role is not a tremendously challenging role to upgrade upon, I think. I'm not in love with him as a player. So Powell could actually be a pretty good contributor in that offense, especially if they don't love Mecole Hardman the way we had thought they did right at the start of his career. And his kind of progression has stalled. So there is potentially that spot there for a Cornell Powell to be their like 3rd option. You know, that role is very much there. And then the other wild card is Trey Smith, the guy they got in the 6th round, who was only available in the 6th round because of medical issues. You know, blood clots in his lungs, which caused him to miss time and is an ongoing issue in terms of, you know, potentially keeps him from practicing as much as other people and just the kind of scary medical thing that's going to freak out a bunch of teams, right? But if he's playing and if he's practicing to any kind of regular degree, like that guy has, you know, day 1, day 2 talent. That's a guy you've just picked from the 6th round who could actually be a starting offensive lineman in the future if things break your way. But obviously the risk is why he's in the 6th round.
Yeah, Trey Smith could be, absolute monster payoff if healthy for the Chiefs. Another offensive lineman, adding more depth there. So, look, the Chiefs they're a fascinating case, man. Like I said, I keep comparing them to the New England Dynasty. And it's like how do you do it? How do you keep this thing together? Make sure that the rest of the roster stays at least solid when you have the trump card in Patrick Mahomes. So watching the way they do this is going to be a lot of fun in the coming years. Let's go to Los Angeles Chargers. By the way, we gave the Broncos an A-, and the Chiefs got a B+. And now to Los Angeles Chargers, one of your favorite drafts.
Surely if you're going by city, it's got to be Las Vegas.
Oh, it's a lot. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, we got to go Las Vegas.
Uh-huh.
So it's Raiders next.
Yes.
Sorry, Charger fan. It's the Raiders.
Yeah.
The
Wait your
Raiders
turn.
are up next. I was trying to stay positive for a little bit longer. Or it's like a positivity
Well,
sandwich.
that's good. I've been positive for the whole way. Now I can actually...
And then we'll finish the West with some positivity. Look, the Raiders' second-round pick I liked.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the best picks in the draft. Getting Trevon Merrick at 43, the guy that we had as the 16th best player in the draft, phenomenal value, which is... It continues a trend of all the Raiders drafts, which is like if you just rearrange the players in terms of draft order, you can make it look like a very good draft. It's just that they almost always start off with a colossal reach.
Yeah, this is just a consistent trend here. The PFF draft board's not the only thing you should look at, but
Yes.
there's a consensus draft board. There's also just the results of the players on the field.
Right, and it's also important to know that, so even the consensus board will be off in terms of what the NFL thinks sometimes. Now, there are definitely reports that Alex Leatherwood was going to go in the first round. So we have him as the 40th best player on our board. I don't know where he was in the consensus board, but I think you can fairly safely say that he would have been picked ahead of pick number 32, somewhere in the first round, but they picked him at 17.
Right.
Now, this is a trend of Raiders draft picks predating Mike Mayock, to be fair to him, of just taking guys that are a significant reach compared with what the big board, the consensus board, our board, anything says that these guys should go, which even if you're right about the player is just bad strategy. Like
And there's a good chance that they've been wrong about the players.
Well, they have been wrong about the players for a lot of them.
Can we go back through the history here?
Yes.
Cleveland Ferrell goes 4th overall.
Yes.
We did have him as an early second-round pick. Would have been a nice pick there. He hasn't produced
Early
like
second round pick.
Yes,
right.
he hasn't produced like that. Josh Jacobs has been the best player that they've drafted in recent years, but
He's
as
a
a
running
running
back.
back, makes little impact on actual wins and losses.
Correct.
Jonathan Abram has been one of the worst players.
And was like the 180-something player on the board.
Yeah, because he's limited and he's just a strong safety. And if there's a chance for him to maybe figure it out, it could be here in year 3. Now that he's a true strong safety in Gus Bradley's system, but they just drafted like 3 guys to maybe take his job. Last year, Henry Ruggs, he goes at 10, 12.
12.
I had this nice list on the draft show
yeah.
that broke it all down. He goes, and we had him as a first-round player, but also the 3rd wide receiver on the board. He was the first wide receiver off the board there. So
And it's made zero impact so far.
CeeDee Lamb or Jerry Jeudy clearly would have been a more impactful player already. I still love Ruggs. I love speed. I wouldn't have taken him first. I would have loved CeeDee Lamb for Derek Carr. And then Damon Arnett. You know, people had him as maybe a fringe second rounder.
Yeah.
And he goes in the first round because, you know, the stopwatch did get him at 4.41 or whatever it was. And he had a rough rookie season. And just we'll see if he can ever bounce back from that.
They have had 6 first-round picks in the last 3 years. And those guys so far have combined for a negative PFF WAR grade or WAR figure, right? Effectively saying that if you just threw 6 random bodies out there, they would have contributed more to your team winning games than the 6 guys they've spent first-round picks on. They have had the kind of run of draft capital that should have transformed a franchise in a positive direction. And so far, in large part because of the kind of reaches they've been making, they haven't done that. And here's the thing, this is why it's so catastrophic, is even if they had been right about those players, they would have been leaving extensive meat on the bone by not trading down and taking advantage of the fact that nobody else has them ranked that highly. So Abraham's a perfect example, right? If that dude is 180-something on the big board, let's say that we're harsh on him and most people have him at 100.
I don't think he was that low. He was closer to 100, but
it was definitely, whatever, we can look it up. Let's say we're harsh on it and other people just have him at number 100. You can trade down at least a full round knowing that you can still pick that guy. Because even the most like optimistic other team out there is going to be splitting the difference with you. So the fact that you just pick the guy and go, I don't care, I think he's a stud, let's draft him where we have him. It's not playing the game right. Like, this isn't just find the best players. This is find the best players and take advantage of the value difference between you and everybody else. You have to game the system as well as just picking good players.
To a point. Yes, you do. You absolutely do. However, you know, again, nobody's perfect at this whole thing. So that's part of the reason why you have to game the system and not be so overconfident in your projections, right? The point of Alex Leatherwood's our number one. They said he was their number one offensive tackle.
Tom
Mayock
Cable's
said this.
number one.
Tom Cable's number one. Mayock was all in on him.
Over Penei Sewell, Rashawn Slater, Christian Darrisaw, like number one tackle in the draft.
And that's fine. They might be right. Who knows?
But if they are, they have to recognize they're the only people that think that.
I'm also, I mean, there's a few different reasons why I'm down on this too, though. Because first off, let me just say this: if they overdrafted all of these players and they all hit, then you would be like, well, these guys are geniuses. I mean, and maybe they are. You know, if Cleveland Ferrell has been clearly the best edge and he's been a dominant player, you would say, okay, everybody else missed something. Mayock and the Raiders nailed it. Even if he's overdrafted, you would say, okay, maybe everybody else
that would be giving you an argument. Here's what it's like.
But that hasn't happened though.
Here's what it's like. It's like if you're playing poker, right? Poker has a fairly sort of well-established mathematical backbone to the whole thing, in that you know when your hand is going up against the other hand, you know, roughly speaking, how often that comes off, right? It's mathematical, right? You know what the cards are left in the deck. You know how often that's going to hit, and you're going to end up getting paid off. So if they were making these plays and picking good players, it would be like going against the math and coming up right every time, right? Going on a run where you make a call, you're like, screw it. I know what the math says. I'm going on the small side, and I'm getting it right. But it would be like doing that and not maximizing the return in terms of the cash you're getting, right? You're still... okay, you've been right for a while, but you haven't actually maximized the value you can get back in terms of money. You haven't maximized the amount you're winning off this unsustainably good run, which is what the Raiders would have been attempting to do, and they haven't even been getting it right. They've just been going against the math and striking out. It's been like, I know you're sitting there with pocket aces, but I've got this 3-8 of jacks that I really love, so I'm going to raise you. Let's see how that goes. And then the cards come out, and it turns out your 3-8 of clubs didn't beat the pocket aces. And you're like, okay, well, let's give it another go. And you just re-up it. Like, it's just ridiculous.
My bigger issue, so you're right. If you flipped picks, right? Leatherwood was 40th on our board. He goes at 17. Merrig was 16th on our board. He goes at 43.
Yeah.
It's almost a like-for-like flip.
Flip them upside down. It's perfect.
So even let's say that happened. Merrig goes first round. He's a safety. I love Merrig as a player, and I don't think it was a great safety class. He was the one guy I kept. If I mocked him to your team in the first round, I was like, I don't really want to come away with just Trayvon Merrig in the first round. I feel like there's impact offensive players. There's a Caleb Farley flyer that I would love to take at corner, especially if I am the Raiders. So it'd be a fine draft. And Leatherwood in the second round, we'd say great at 43. The bigger issue I have with this is still reversing course during this offseason. And it's the moves that led up to this. I'm almost viewing it from the same lens as the Chiefs. The Chiefs didn't have an offensive line weakness last year, but they had to come into this offseason and solve it, right? The Raiders didn't have an offensive line weakness last year either. And either they felt they forced to overhaul the whole thing, or they just felt like they needed to. I don't know. You know, so now they're filling this need. They traded Trent Brown, their starting right tackle. Mm-hmm. So you've used your first round pick to replace a guy, Trent Brown, who's a good solid right tackle.
They traded away 3/5 of their offensive line, and we're trying to cut 2 of them.
Right. So from Colton Miller's come good at left tackle. Richie Incognito comes back at left guard. But they're going to have 3 new starters at center, right guard, and right tackle. Gabe Jackson's out. Rodney Hudson out. Trent Brown out. So you use the 17th overall pick.
And Richie's like 127 years old, so he's not lasting for long.
But like the 17th overall pick is used to just kind of get you back maybe to status quo. If Alex Leatherwood is as good as Trent Brown last year, that's a huge win. If he's as good as Tom Cable says, okay, great, that's a huge win. But it seems like every move the Raiders make is one step forward, one step back. One step in. Here's another example. John Brown. They bring John Brown in to replace Nelson Aguilar on the cheap. It's only 1 year. Can he be the same deep threat as Aguilar? Probably. Good move. But then they spend a ton of money on Kenyon Drake to be the backup running back. So every time I felt like the Raiders are making one good move, it's one bad one in there. I feel like the draft is very similar. I was waiting for their round 3 pick to be like the highest player on our board and us to feel good about it. But even those picks
and not just that,
didn't all go that way.
But with the John Brown thing, it's like, okay, if he's going to be Nelson Aguilar, then what is Ruggs doing? Like, Ruggs was supposed to be Aguilar last year, and Aguilar ended up being Aguilar.
That's 2 speed receivers.
Yeah, but at some point, some point, it's Aguilar, this compounding issue of what you're doing is recognizing mistakes you've made in the past, fixing them, but never changing the process that leads you to the mistake again. So They did that before with Abram, right? You're swapping him out. You're essentially admitting, yeah, we screwed that up. We're bringing in a bunch of players who can do that role. But then you're just repeating the process of massively overdrafting a guy. And as much as it's kind of funny that, hey, if you just rearrange the order of the guys they picked, they had a great draft. But even that doesn't like excuse it because, okay, Merrick did fall where he fell, right? So you can't just say, well, if we took him in the first round, then we could take, in the guy in the second, it would be great, because he was going to fall another round. So you could potentially have taken an actual first rounder in the first round, and then Merrick would have fallen to you. And now you've got this great looking draft.
And I know trading down's not easy, right? But I also want
But they've missed it so consistently now that, like, okay, maybe this time they were manning the phones. Nobody came up with an offer that was even vaguely acceptable. So you take the guy on your board, fine. But 6 times now this has happened. Like, this isn't the phone is not ringing enough for anybody to move down. This is, you're not interested in those moves.
If you love Leatherwood that much, you could trade down. And yeah, if you could trade down to 24, 28 and still get him, then it's a far better team building strategy. I don't know if the phone lines were open or not, but I mean, when you hire scouts, you're hiring the guy that you think is the best player evaluator, but they're not necessarily the best when it comes to draft theory and understand. There are some scouts that are fantastic. A lot of GMs came through the scouting ranks and they've figured it out and they know how to maneuver and manipulate the draft. But it does seem like some do not still understand. Again, I think the Vikings, we'll get to that when we talk about the North. The Vikings got 2 potential starters on their offensive line for the price of 1, just by trading down and still getting a Christian Darrisaw. So, yeah, the evaluation has to be right, but that manipulating the draft is just the way to do it. And we haven't seen the Raiders do that just yet. Divine Diablo's he's a fun player at 80 overall. He's a monster strong safety that they say he's going to transition to linebacker. So again, you're talking about the 80th overall pick going to linebacker, where you've just invested in Corey Littleton and Nick Kwiatkowski the previous year. And Littleton's disappointed. Kwiatkowski's still a solid player, friend of the show. So you just throw Diablo into the mix. Tyree Gillespie, he's an actual safety that's going to come in and play safety and battle with Jonathan Abram and Merrick, who you just drafted, right? So it's like and Carl Joseph comes back this offseason as well. So I just don't see the Raiders getting better. That's just the bottom line. I didn't love the draft. We gave it a C, in part because of the Leatherwood thing. And like you said, Mike Mayock came to the press conference and said this might not be a popular move. This is going to surprise some people.
They knew it. Like, they knew doing this that it was a breach compared to everybody else, which, again, I'm not even saying that that's necessarily a terrible thing. You can draft a player that you are confident in, that nobody else really loves, but you have to, A, be right, or B, take advantage of the fact that you're so far different from everybody else by playing the game and maximizing the value that you can get for that. Trade down and still get the same guy, and then go, hey, we know you guys don't love this guy, but we do, and hey, we picked up an extra second-round pick in getting him. Instead, they just went, nah, we're going to take this guy where we are, knowing that it's a massive reach, knowing that everybody else hates it, and then just hope we're right when we haven't been the last 5 times we tried this.
I'm going to say a positive and a negative about Tom Cable.
Okay.
I mean, he was in Seattle for all the terrible offensive lines of Russell Wilson. I also don't know
that's not your positive, right?
That's the negative.
Okay.
Sorry. I don't know if that's a good. I don't think that's a good thing.
Sure.
Seattle invested in J.R. Sweezy, they did turn him from a defensive tackle to a starting guard, but it took 4 years, and they didn't get to reap the benefits of that. They put a defensive tackle out there for 3 years and let Russ get killed. On the other hand, Colton Miller looked like a disaster. I think this was another Cable guy, really athletic tackle. He's developed into a solid starting left tackle, a Villanueva-like left tackle.
Who
Good
they
job.
just had to pay big money to.
What's that?
Who they just had to pay big money to. So it's like even Colton Miller, who's developed pretty well.
He went from disaster to pretty solid, which is good, impressive.
Which means that his rookie contract, the valuable part, at least 50% of that wasn't tremendously valuable because he wasn't good.
Right.
So you're only getting the benefit of him for like 2 years, a year and a half, before you have to pay him big money, in which case you might as well have just gone and signed a big money tackle in the first place.
So if Leatherwood is Tom Cable's top offensive lineman, fine. I mean, we'll see how that plays out. By the way, I can see why people fall in love with Leatherwood. He makes some impressive run blocks, absolutely crushes people. Front side of zone, love it, love it, love it. Got some questions in pass pro. I do think Leatherwood's better than Cam Robinson. coming out of Alabama. Maybe what people wanted Cam Robinson to be, but we'll see. Didn't love the Raiders draft overall.
No.
For the fourth straight year? For a few years now. Los Angeles Chargers. We loved what they did. We didn't love it. Yeah, again, we've been wrong. We didn't love what they did last year. They got Justin Herbert. It didn't matter.
We didn't hate what they did last year either. I mean, we didn't have a tremendous amount of confidence in Justin Herbert being the player that Justin Herbert has become.
But I didn't mind them taking it. They needed a quarterback.
Right.
So
that's what I'm saying. Like, we didn't hate on it. It was just like, particularly because he went after Tua. You know?
Right.
So it wasn't like we might have hated it a lot more if they had had the choice of Tua and Herbert and taken Herbert, and then we would have looked even dumber. But yeah, we didn't hate that pick. It's just we didn't have confidence in what it became. Now, we didn't love, their next draft pick. I don't think we hated that draft. It's just it has been a lot better than we thought it would be.
So the opposite, again, maybe it's just the way the offseason flows with my opinions on how teams are doing it. The Chargers have completely reshaped their offensive line this offseason. I've enjoyed that. They got the top center in free agency in Corey Linsley, only gave up a handful of pressures last year. Matt Filer comes in to likely start at left guard. Ode Abushi comes in to start at right guard. Last year they got Brian Bulaga to start at right tackle. The big question was left tackle coming into the draft. We kept giving them Christian Darrisaw, third tackle on our draft board. Well, they get the number 2 tackle on our draft board because Rashawn Slater fell. And reportedly, some teams, was it Minnesota, trying to go up and go get Rashawn Slater. So I think the Chargers should be happy to just have him plug and play right at left tackle.
Yeah, I mean, that was a great result for them. As you said, we had been expecting the top 2 tackles on the board to be gone by the time the Chargers came up, and they were obviously always going to be taking a left tackle, so they would have taken Darrisaw. But Slater was there, and we had him as the number 2 tackle on our board, but there were people out there that had him as the number 1 that think his technique is more polished and at a higher place right now than Penei Sewell's is. He's got multiple games of exceptional tape against Chase Young, NFL caliber pass rushers on his college tape. That's a great plug and play option for the Chargers. And then I think their draft just kept getting better as they went down the draft. Like, they nailed it with their first round pick. It continues this rebuild on the offensive line. Now, 3/5 of it are coming in this year, and all should be significant upgrades. If Brian Bulaga can stay healthy, that's 4/5 that are well above average, you would expect, which is like a massive improvement over what it was a year ago.
Number 30 pass blocking grade in the league last year, which is, again, we always say, hey, Justin Herbert might regress to the mean. He was really good under pressure. However, he was behind the number 30 pass blocking offensive line. Just getting that to creep back to what average is going to give him more clean pockets. And perhaps it's even more impressive given what Herbert was able to do behind that terrible offensive line. Those are the situations that we make massive excuses for quarterbacks. Josh Rosen was behind a bad line in his rookie season, or Sam Darnold's never played behind a good offensive line, or Josh Allen never was good until his offensive line got to average. Well, Herbert still had success despite the offensive line. Now, his playmakers are better than those other guys had earlier in their career. Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Tyron Johnson became quite a threat last year, but they had Josh Palmer to the mix, who's a really nice deep threat. Reminds me a little bit of David Moore from Seattle as a guy who's not really going to do a whole lot after the catch, but just win down the field often. Mm-hmm. Give me as many of those guys as possible with Herbert, and then I'll let you go nuts on Asante Samuel because I think he is one of the best fits in the entire draft, given that Brandon Staley's coming in, bringing his Rams defense to the Chargers.
Phenomenal scheme fit, I think, for this defense. And a guy that has an obvious starting spot just sitting there waiting for him, given that they got rid of Casey Hayward, who had reached the age where he started to decline. Asante Samuel Jr., to me, is a first-round cornerback in this class all day long, whereas I don't love the things that J.C. Horn struggles with. I was going to call him Joe Horn. The things that J.C. Horn struggles with and how they will translate to the NFL. I think the opposite is true for Samuel. Like the stuff that he struggles with, i.e. being 5'10", 180, I just don't care.
I don't struggle with that.
No, you don't. Never struggle. Well, you probably struggle with it for like a day or two.
I have been 5'10". I've also been 180.
And it was a struggle.
Yeah,
and then after that, gone. But those things I just don't think are an issue, the way he plays the game. He has the things you need to mitigate that size issue if that's what you're going to be. He's got one of the fastest sort of T-steps, the ability to just put his foot in the ground and burst towards the receiver or the ball for a break I've ever seen. And not just that, but there's a bunch of plays on his tape where it's obvious that he understands what's coming, right? He reacts essentially faster than you can react if you were just reading the receiver. You know what I mean? So he's going like almost before, or at least at the very same instant as the receiver is actually making his break to show that he's, cutting off the route and running a hitch, or breaking to the outside and running an out pattern. And you can't do that unless you know it's coming. You can't do that just from reading him. There's no reaction time there, which means like he's in the tape. He's watching this stuff. He understands route concepts. He understands down and distance. He understands tendencies. These are the kind of things you need if you're going to be undersized, not the fastest guy in the world, and you're essentially physically outmatched by the receiver that's covering you. But that's what, like, Richard Sherman has made a career out of that, right? He's very physical, and he offsets a lot of his lack of speed with that. But he's also maybe the smartest cornerback we've seen ever, right? The dude knows what's coming, and the amount of plays where he's running the route for the receiver or able to sort of bait them into what they want to do anyway. Like, he makes so many plays because he's at least as smart as the guys trying to get things done on offense. Asante Samuel Jr. shows a lot of the same things on tape, and because of that, in this zone scheme where he can have his eyes on the quarterback, it's just got like great play written all over it.
It is, you make the point all the time. Far more to cornerback than just playing man coverage. You have a team that the Rams played more zone than any team in the league last year, so they're bringing that system over. Their levels of zone, it's a lot of quarters, it's a lot of cover 3, it's 3-seam, it's a little bit of the Seahawks stuff. It's a mesh of everything, a blend. The cover 2, the whole thing. And most of the time you're playing with your eyes on the quarterback, and that is Asante Samuel's strength, right? I just wanted him to go somewhere where he's playing with his eyes on the quarterback. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about J.C. Horn in the South episodes, but he was more of a press man player that might be going to a zone scheme in Carolina, unless they're going to change. So that doesn't feel like the best fit. So it's always interesting seeing those, but I thought Samuel could not have asked for a better landing spot. And the Chargers needed it, man. We focused so much on that first-round offensive lineman, but Casey Hayward's gone now after regressing last year. Chris Harris is awesome, but, he's getting older, man. He's getting older.
But he also, like, Chris Harris gives them the versatility to, so a lot of people were saying that, Samuel might be a slot receiver or slot corner at the next level. That's where he's going to be pegged because of his size. Worst case scenario, that's where Samuel ends up and is a really good player. Chris Harris can pivot outside if they need him to, right? In an ideal world, Samuel can play outside, and he's your new Casey Hayward, and then you've got Michael Davis that they brought back and Chris Harris manning the slot. If it's not an ideal world, and maybe Samuel can't play outside against those more physical, freakish receivers, he goes into the slot and Chris Harris moves back outside, and you're still good. Like, it's still an upgrade. The worst case scenario for them is that they spend a second-round pick on a slot-only corner, which is not bad value.
And look, slot in this system, Jalen Ramsey played in the slot in the Rams system last year too, a lot, depending on, again, it's zone concepts, it's playing matchups, it's, versatility is good in this scheme. So I love it. I like a lot of what the Chargers did. I think those first 3 players are all contributors. Trey McKitty has a chance to see the field and replace. Jared Cook comes in, but long term, Hunter Henry needs to be replaced there at tight end. And then Chris Rumpf, another wild card who comes in and was an incredible edge defender at Duke, will transition more to linebacker in the NFL, but he's got some pass rush moves if they want to deploy him in that way. And then Brendan James is a pretty good pass blocking tackle. Is not great in the run game. Get him in the 5th round. I'm all for it. Finally get to the AFC East.
A+ grade for the Chargers.
A+ for the Chargers. Who's first in the AFC East? Dolphins? Buffalo Bills.
Yes.
Fascinating draft for the Bills. They were close to the Bucs, I would say, as far as being a loaded roster where you didn't necessarily want to see them. You didn't know where they were going to go. Always like to see them add cornerback depth if they can. But they went with projects. They went with 4 monsters to kick this thing off. Gregory Rousseau, 6'6", long edge defender in the first round. Carlos Basham, an edge defensive interior hybrid. 6'9" Spencer Brown out of Northern Iowa. 6'9" Tommy Doyle. 6'8" Tommy Doyle out of Miami of Ohio. Just went with monster projects on the defensive line and offensive line with their first 4 picks.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a crazy approach when you have the flexibility, as you say, to have a roster that doesn't have any glaring needs, right? I think you can approach that in a few different ways, and I think the Bucs did it probably the best in terms of taking a mix. I think you should probably take a couple of gambles. I think you should probably take a couple of safe picks for the future, players that can step into a role, if not this year, then the next year, and just sort of hedge your bets across the board a little bit. The Bills went a lot more towards, well, let's just throw everything at some gambles, knowing that we don't have a great, nobody has a great strike rate anyway, so let's take some players that if they hit could absolutely catapult this thing through the roof, and in particular on the edge or on the defensive line, where even if they both pan out, you can find a way to use both of them. I think getting guys like Rousseau and Basham Jr., they give you a real useful gamble to take, because you do kind of need some edge rusher help. You just need some defensive line help, period. You're not dead in the water without it, but if one or both those guys pan out, it's Christmas. It's fantastic for that defense.
Gregory Rousseau, we've talked about, as the guy that really did get hurt by the opt-out. He had 16 sacks in 2019, but, PFF, we said those sack totals were a little inflated, a lot of cleanup stuff. He wasn't a dominant pass rusher, but you expected him to take a step forward and maybe dominate here in 2020. Didn't have the opportunity, but he's 6'7" with almost 35-inch arms. He is a monster who could bulk up and maybe be that DeForest Buckner type. So the Bills have invested a lot in the defensive line the last couple of years, as far as adding depth, where they've needed that, as far as Jerry Hughes getting a little bit older. Ed Oliver hasn't necessarily panned out, but you bring A.J. Epinesa in last year. These two players this year with Basham and Rousseau. I think Basham has a chance to maybe make a more immediate impact, even though he was the second-round player. But Rousseau's, keep an eye on Rousseau 3 years from now.
Yeah, but I like the idea of, look, they've invested a lot in this defensive line, but none of it has really hit yet, so keep swinging.
Yeah, absolutely. And they like to, defensive lines, you like to rotate. You like to have six to eight guys that can contribute anyway. Add a speed receiver in Marquez Stevenson in the sixth round. There's not a great path to the field for him, but I just like take speed shots.
Always,
I am all about that. Speed shots? Is that okay? Can we say that? Cornerback is still the question. Your buddy Levi Wallace hanging on there.
They haven't done it to him this year. I've been saying every year they're going to bring in someone to take his job. They haven't really yet. Now maybe they still will. The free agent market is still open. We just passed the deadline where players don't count towards the compensatory pick formula, which is an incentive to start grabbing people now as opposed to last week. So maybe they will bring in somebody still to try and take his job. But so far,
they've looked at Richard Sherman, right? And Sherman's looked at them.
I think that's certainly been connected. I don't know how real the interest is from either side. But so far, through the two biggest team-building periods, the Bills have yet to bring in the guy to take Levi Wallace's job this year.
Yeah, more than ever, there's a lot of post-draft moves to be made. And yeah, that could be a spot for the Bills. I always look at the Bills and the Bucs and the teams that have these really good rosters, right? The Chiefs. What's the worst-case scenario? What could fall apart that could ruin your season? It's almost always the secondary. So it's the place you do want to add more depth than ever. And the Bills look a little thin there. They don't have the deepest group of corners. They did add some safety help and DeMar Hamlin later in the draft. But their safeties have been solid with Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer for years. Tre'Davious White's obviously a star at one cornerback position. But again, Levi and then Teron Johnson in the slot. If something could go wrong, it's those guys not performing up to par in the system. So maybe some more moves to be made there for the Bills. We gave it a B. A very unique draft, I would say, with the four defensive line and offensive line monsters there. I like the offensive line forward-looking approach as well.
Yeah.
Backups for Deion Dawkins and for Darrell Williams.
They've done a good job in terms of understanding that I think you should just be constantly adding bodies to the offensive line. Doesn't matter if they don't pan out. Keep going, because if you find one, it's kind of like quarterbacks, right? This idea of you should draft a quarterback in the low rounds every year because who knows when you'll strike gold. I think you should just be constantly adding bodies to the offensive line, because you never know when that guy that you thought was only really a useful backup gets pressed into service and actually can be more than that.
You do love the Chiefs draft, or Chiefs offseason adding all those offensive line bodies. So why not the Bills?
There you go.
They didn't get a running back. They were rumored to be getting a running back in the first round. You said they wouldn't do it. Devin Singletary, Zach Moss, they did bring in Matt Breida this offseason as well. That's your speed guy.
In fact, yes, I've been vindicated semi-vindicated, because I didn't see the Jags spending a first-round pick on a running back either.
Our DraftKings prop went over. The very specific PFF draft prop over.
The two teams that you said were in the market for running backs, Miami and Buffalo, neither of them went running back in the first round because they're too smart. I told you this. The Jags, who don't have a great record of being smart over the last however long, were the team that did grab a running back in the first.
Good job, man.
And
You
the
didn't do
Steelers,
it.
who we always knew.
Steelers and Jags, they did it.
Yeah.
Mentioned it earlier, but want to call attention to the hoodie and the entire PFF NFL draft show this weekend. Our newest sponsor of the PFF NFL podcast, it's Sweat Tailor, premium menswear brand that is defining a new kind of casual. From jackets and pants to joggers and hoodies, Sweat Tailor's designs are made to seamlessly fit into your life. Wherever you're going, runway, office to drinks to wherever the night takes you, specializing in athleisure wear for men. Pieces are designed with comfort and versatility in mind for every day. They are comfy. Wore them all weekend. Wore them for 8 hours of draft coverage on Saturday. 22 hours total of coverage. Sweat Tailor did us well this weekend. And we've got a special promo code for you, PFF-SWEAT. PFF-SWET. It's 25% off your order at sweattailor.com. PFF-SWEAT. SWET. Miami Dolphins are next in the AFC East. We gave the Bills a B. I said that, right?
Yep.
Dolphins, what did we give them? We liked their draft again, I believe. B+. Solid draft. I think this one does get remembered for, as we mentioned in the last podcast, Waddle versus Devontae Smith at 6 overall.
Not just that, but now you have to start factoring in the trade. Because
now you don't like the trade. You liked the trade originally.
Well, so here's the thing, right? First of all, I wonder if the plan was always Waddle, which is what they're saying now, because of course they are, right? Like, Waddle was the player you got. So obviously Waddle was always the guy we loved at this spot. Nothing ever changed. This was what we were doing the whole way. We think he's a superstar. Having said that, Cincinnati went Jamar Chase one pick ahead of that. And now I know, look, I'm invested in this because my theory all along was that Miami made the calculation that they could trade 3 to 6 and still get Jamar Chase because the Bengals would pick Sewell. That didn't happen. So I'm invested in still making that a real thing. But I think there's a reasonable question to ask of, did Miami think that Jamar Chase would be there at 6? And when he wasn't, now the question is, well, what do we do? And do we still stay with wide receiver? Okay, we really like Waddle. Let's grab him now. Or was the plan always Waddle? If the plan was always Waddle, I have more questions about trading back up to 6, because now you are making that determination of Waddle versus Devontae Smith plus the trade you had to make to jump back up that far.
I think the plan was what we said going through. They traded up to get a blue chip player. They just felt the Waddle fit that. I figured I think they would have taken Jamar Chase over Waddle. I'm a little surprised they didn't take Penei Sewell, given what was on the board. But I think they did. I think they did target Waddle. I think they do look at their current depth chart, say we've only got 1 year of Will Fuller, and they're looking at it like I look at it, which is the speed component does matter. Even though Devontae Smith is a better receiver, he's more productive. I think they're trying to hit this home run, and maybe in a lot of draft rooms, Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill's name were used. We know that. Even if that is the high-end play, it's what they're chasing, the same way the Raiders were chasing it with Henry Ruggs. So they're looking at Devontae Parker and Waddle as a complement and 1 year of Will Fuller and saying, okay, cover this.
I just think it's a similar mistake to Henry Ruggs. Not in the way that, look, I think Waddle is a better player than Ruggs and was in their college careers as well. So from that point of view, it's more defensible. But again, it's look who you're comparing them to. Like, Henry Ruggs was taken above Jerry Jeudy when at no point in their college careers was he a better player. Right. Obviously a worse player. Like, just easily looking at anytime you watch Alabama, you couldn't possibly come out of the game thinking that Ruggs was a superior player. I think the same thing is true for Waddle and Devontae Smith, though I will at least acknowledge that seems to be closer than I think it is. And, people keep making this argument that Waddle was the number 1 receiver when they were both healthy for 4 weeks at the start of the season.
You've shot down the argument in 17 straight podcasts. You don't need to do it again.
It isn't true.
You don't need to do it again.
It's not true. It just isn't. But people will make that argument. But I think it's at least closer because of that, hey, look, yeah, Waddle was incredibly productive in a way that Ruggs wasn't. But ultimately, because of the reasons that it isn't true, that's why Devontae Smith is a better prospect. He was as productive, more productive in every other capacity, and does more things. He can still be a deep threat. Like, the idea of we need to chase the deep threat receiver, the guy with speed, because Devontae Smith can't do that is ridiculous. Devontae Smith has got plays all through his tape where he's running past people, running by people, running away from people. Like, the dude isn't slow. He's not missing the speed element from his game. But in addition to that, he's a better route runner, has better body control, is a better blocker despite being 166 pounds. He's just a better receiver. So I think you have to now look at this and say, they traded up to make this happen. This isn't just grabbing a wide receiver who might not be higher on the board than everybody else has him. It's you also sacrificed a pick to do that.
There's a lot of storylines surrounding Devontae Smith here because the Cowboys allowed the Eagles to go get him. So in the division, if Devontae Smith is killing them for the next 8 to 10 years, you're going to be thinking, oh, you let the Eagles do that. Granted, maybe the Giants were going to do it instead at 11. So there's that storyline. And then there's the storyline of Tua got one of his Alabama receivers and he got Jalen Waddle instead of Devontae Smith. So if Devontae Smith is tearing it up in Philadelphia, either with or without Jalen Hurts, we're going to look back and say, man, maybe Tua got the wrong guy or maybe he got the right guy if Jalen Waddle becomes that deep threat. Either way, I think the Dolphins moving in the right direction as far as building around Tua. I like the addition of Liam Eichenberg at left guard. I think he'll step in and play left guard, former tackle over at Notre Dame. You need some development from Austin Jackson at left tackle, but that's a nice fit there. Hunter Long at tight end. He can be that true on-the-ball tight end to complement Mike Gesicki, who's turned into a pretty good playmaker at that position. Love the addition in the secondary. Where did I lose?
Javon Holland.
Yeah, Javon Holland. My goodness. Played over the slot, played safety, did a little just more versatility in the secondary for the Dolphins. Shout out to the internets who said Steve was driving in a convertible and was hit by an overhead street sign. They're hypothesizing in the chat what's happened over here. If you're listening in podcast land, you probably want to see the video version too. Or maybe don't. Don't click on it. Don't go click that YouTube link. Full disclosure, we have to record a whole nother podcast. It's like double.
Well, that's going to ruin the continuity, you know?
It might.
Yeah.
If we're wearing the same thing for 2 out of 3 shows.
And you have the same giant hole in your head?
Yeah. Don't be alarmed. Don't be alarmed. Do you think the Dolphins are doing enough to figure out what they have in Tua and to build around him?
Yeah. I mean, it all comes down to Tua now. I think they've done a good job surrounding him with talent. The offensive line is still a question mark, but you can see why they would at least think, hey, we've invested in this. Let's see how it pans out. It comes down to Tua now. He's got to show a significant step forward over what he showed a year ago, and there's no reason to think he can't do that. I mean, he's got, I think, the tools to do it. We just need to see it now. Dolphins
also had Jalen Phillips. Again, people wanted them to take a running back at 18. I had just seen that. Just think about the difference there. If they had taken a running back, and who cares that their depth chart right now is Myles Gaskin and Malcolm Brown and Salved Ahmed. I mean, whatever. But if they had taken a running back there and not Jalen Phillips, not a guy that could be the best edge in this entire class, just the payoff of a Jalen Phillips could be incredible. Only 542 snaps last year at Miami. Has not played more than 700 in his career, but production solid last year. Plays the run, rushes the passer, filled a need. So I like what they did. I like what they did with their 2 first-rounders, even if Waddle didn't go maybe where we thought he would. He went higher than we thought he would. I cannot wait to see it pan out. I cannot wait to see all him and Ruggs and all of these speed receivers, what happens over these next couple of years if we've been chasing too much of this 4-2, 4-3 stuff, or if the best receivers still are the better play going forward.
Which so far they seem like they have been.
It's early, man. It's early.
Yeah.
I still have faith in Ruggs with the Raiders.
Really?
You want to get them. Waddle's going to get open, man. He's going to get open for him.
Sure, but so would Devontae Smith.
Okay, I get it. Let's not. We'll do a whole when I'm gone, you can do a whole podcast on Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle.
Sweet.
All right, we got the Jets and the Patriots left. New England Patriots first. They get Mac Jones at 15. All these rumors about the Patriots trading up, and they end up getting Mac Jones at 15.
I just love that Mac Jones ended up going exactly where he was supposed to go like 2 months ago before all this madness started. It's like Mac Jones is a mid-first round player. And then it's, hey, guys, the NFL loves Mac Jones more than you think he is. He's going to go higher than you think. And then, hey, guys, number 8 to Carolina is now Mac Jones' floor. And at that point, we were like, this is nuts. What is going on? And then it's San Francisco makes the trade, and it's for Mac Jones. And I was like, what the hell? He's going 3. This is ridiculous. Now it's like think pieces on what are they seeing in Mac Jones. And then eventually they pass on Mac Jones and he slides all the way back to 15. And it's like the last 2 months didn't exist. We just did this giant circuit for nothing. And Mac Jones was the mid-first round pick everybody thought he was to start with.
So it's fascinating to me. I love it. I say fascinating a lot. But think about this whole process. The Patriots, supposedly, we'll talk about the Jets in a minute. The Jets jumped the Patriots to get Elijah Vera Tucker, the guard. And supposedly the Patriots wanted to take Elijah Vera Tucker. Then he's gone and they just kind of settled on Mac Jones.
Yeah.
It is very interesting to me that we look at quarterbacks as this special world, right? And I think NFL teams do as well. But I think the fact that you would say it's either a quarterback or a guard, if you're willing to take the quarterback in the first, and we'll talk about the Vikings later in the week, if you're willing to take Justin Fields, then everything else doesn't matter.
And the Patriots are really interesting because Bill Belichick went on this little explanation about how their scouting grading works, right? And it isn't just like this guy's an 84, this guy's an 82, you take the 84. Like they have a system of color coding, a system of letter grading, a system of number grading, maybe a couple of other points as well. And they all work together like this giant, insane matrix. And sometimes the colors can override the letters, and the letters can override the numbers, and the numbers can override the colors. And the whole thing fits together in some like giant, the meme with the freaking arrows going everywhere. The whole thing works like that, right? And he's like, I can't even really give you like a for instance, an example, because it takes like 2 months to understand how the whole thing works. So for any normal team, it would be a little bit weird because you would be like, well, how does a guard and a quarterback even exist on the same scale? Whereas at least with the Patriots, you can kind of see, like in this insane matrix, there's probably a way where that is the case. Like Mac Jones is good enough at X to be the 15th player, but not good enough to be like when this guy's, you know what I mean? Like there's enough, the letters override it and the number overrides it. So Mac Jones is behind the guard. Like for the Patriots, you can at least construct a world where that happens because of this insane system that they have for grading players. For anybody else, it's just like, here's an 84 versus an 87. It's like, how could you ever have a guard higher than the quarterback that you think is worth a first-round pick?
Presumably, positional value factures into
of course, I'm sure that's one of the colors or something.
5-year starter,
right,
and a 4-year starter, the whole thing. I'm sure all that stuff is rolled in. But I like Mac Jones at 15 here, especially given the way the Patriots roster is laid out. We said it a million times before the podcast. They filled a lot of their needs along the way. Yeah, it's not the most loaded roster, but it's much better than last year.
I think
they're going to be much better this year.
Great spot for him. I do think, though, that the fact that he lasted to 15 and the fact that they were willing to take Vera Tucker over him, these are not ringing endorsements of Mac Jones as a prospect. In addition to the fact that the 49ers didn't take him at number 3. Like we went from, okay, I can construct a world where he looks really good in Kyle Shanahan's offense and the mental processing is elite, and that's what's going to give him this high ceiling that some people seem to see, to, okay, Mac Jones wasn't taken by the 49ers. He also slid past everybody else that needs a quarterback. The Patriots took him at 15 without being interested in jumping up to trade for him and were willing to take a guard over him, but the Jets grabbed him one spot ahead. It's like this is a sequence of pieces of information that are not really helping the case for Mac Jones being your franchise quarterback.
Plus, so it's different too. Again, we'll talk about the Vikings who were in the Justin Fields market, and they were going to play it the same way. Like if Justin Fields was there, they were going to take him. Right?
Yeah.
The Vikings. The Patriots said if Mac Jones is there, we're going to take him. Obviously, because
the guard isn't
trade up. So but the Vikings have a starting quarterback for multiple seasons under contract. So that's where, and again, we put together a draft board where Mac Jones was 11th or whatever he was, and he was right next to offensive linemen in the whole thing. But we don't have a PFF doesn't have a quarterback under contract, right? We don't have needs to account for. So my point with the Patriots is, obviously they need to fill their long-term quarterback need. They only have Cam Newton for 1 year. Right. Therefore, you would think the quarterback would be more valuable than the guard or anybody else on the board.
And reportedly, the Vikings were at least checking out what it would take to jump up and grab Fields, like at least exploring the phone calls. Now, we don't know the Patriots didn't do that, but it doesn't sound like they did. It's sounding more like the report that came out from some Pittsburgh beat writer before the draft that was like, was it Fields? It was like, hey, the Steelers like Justin Fields as the best quarterback in this draft. Number one, like ahead of Lawrence, ahead of Zach Wilson. They love Fields as the best quarterback in this draft and would be prepared to take him at number 24, but only if Najee Harris isn't there. You're like, excuse me? You think he's the best quarterback in this draft class, but you'll only take him at 24 if the running back isn't there. Like, that's a little bit what it sounds like this is, right? It's like, yeah, we like Mac Jones. We think he's our quarterback of the future, and we'll take him at 15, but only if the guard is gone.
Imagine if the Chiefs said that in 2017. Love Patrick Mahomes. Best prospect we've ever seen.
Yeah.
If he's there at 27, we're all in. Instead, they went and got him at 10 and could change the course of NFL history.
Of course. So it's just, I mean, it doesn't compute. You know what I mean? Like that Fields Steelers scenario makes no earthly sense to anybody with a brain, right? Now, some beat reporter reported that as that's their thinking. Either that guy's out of his goddamn mind or the Steelers are. One of those two things is true. It's not quite as bad, obviously, but it gives you the same kind of vibes, right? It's like, how if you believe that Mac Jones is capable of being your starting quarterback long term, you probably shouldn't have him ranked behind a guard, even a really good one. You know what I mean? It doesn't.
It still comes back to I love getting into Belichick's brain about what he would want at quarterback.
So I guess
I don't know that we really did because he just took the fifth quarterback
right, and that's the thing again, right? Which is the second year in a row. It's like it feels like we haven't really answered that yet. So I guess my point is simply that.
But if he had passed on Mac Jones,
of course it would have been.
Then you still have that feeling. Maybe he just wants the right mobile threat. He does want to get that QB run game going.
But I guess the overall point is you can't possibly look at all these pieces of information and come to a conclusion anything more than they don't love Mac Jones. They like him enough to take him in the middle of the first round and have him compete
unless they tried to move up. I don't know.
Or maybe develop behind. But what I'm saying, the piece of information we have right now can only lead you to the conclusion that they like, not love, Mac Jones.
There's also a world where I said, everybody talked about top 10 quarterback movement. I said, no, it's 10 to 15. That's where quarterback movement happens. That's what actually did happen. There is a world where the Patriots, who do play the board as well as anybody, said, I'm not expecting.
That explains sitting there. That doesn't explain we'll take the guard if he's there.
I don't know that. It's just a report. I don't know that that's true. If they would have taken Vera Tucker over Mac Jones, then that says a lot about Mac Jones.
Yes.
If not, we don't know exactly because they could have said every team up to 15.
Agreed. Yeah.
Didn't need a quarterback, especially once Fields goes off the board. They weren't worried about anything, didn't have to make the move. Now, all that said, I think Cam Newton plays more than Mac Jones this year.
Yeah. I mean,
really do.
Jones won't play until and or less Newton plays his way to the bench or gets hurt.
Now, this is the first time Belichick has had a quarterback he's heavily invested in that people are waiting to see play. Nobody was waiting to see Jimmy Garoppolo play because Brady was playing awesome.
Right.
And it was more just the fact like, okay, when's Brady going to step aside for Jimmy G, even though Belichick reportedly wanted him and then ends up trading him. So this is the first time there'll be a call for another quarterback, and it will be easier if Cam struggles to maybe, go to the next guy because it's not Jarrett Stidham this year. So that will be one of the biggest storylines of the 2021 season.
Yeah.
Mac Jones, New England system. Good fit. I think the supporting cast is fine. Did our faces disappear?
Yeah, I think the board died.
Oh, that's sad. Back to Cincinnati.
But they were another one of these teams that had a draft where they kept halting the slide of a bunch of talented playmakers. So Christian Barmore was their second round pick, who was a guy that was number 12 overall on our big board, like the 12th best player available in the draft. They got in the second round, and was a guy that even, all the way leading up to the draft, there was talk that Barmore was going to go lower than everybody thought he would. Yeah. It's like, what don't teams like about Christian Barmore? Because I think the tape is there.
There was a coachability question.
Coachability, intelligence, learnability, the sort of basically everything that Isaiah Wilson dealt with thrown into one big melting pot, right? And there were reports that Alabama and their regimen and program and the ability to stay on top of all this stuff barely kept this guy together, right? Kept him going to the right place at the right time, doing the right things, and just not screwing up. And the fear is, like Wilson, it's like, what happens when you hand this guy a check with, 6 zeros on it and say, okay, meeting's at 9 a.m., be there. Does that happen, or does he go partying in Nashville? You know what I mean? So, I mean, who the hell knows? Never talked to the guy, never met him. I'm at the risk of being Orlovsky, I'm just relaying information
speculating
here.
Why
but that is apparently why he slipped to where he slipped. Now, I will say that, look, if your concerns are about that kind of stuff, nobody has a closer inside track to Alabama information than Bill Belichick,
right?
Who can just phone up Nick Saban and say, hey, Nick, tell me about this guy, were thinking of drafting him. So for the Patriots to be the ones that buy in and stop that slide and grab him, I think should suggest that they at least feel pretty comfortable about their ability to keep on top of it.
Could be an absolute home run with Barmore at 38, Ronnie Perkins at 96. He was 43rd on our board. He's got good burst off the line of scrimmage from Oklahoma. I will say the Patriots, since we started grading in college, they've been really close to us in a lot of they've drafted a lot of defensive linemen that we liked.
Yeah.
From Trey Flowers,
right.
Dietrich Wise, Chase Winovich, guys that have produced at the NFL level, and they've gotten them in not the first round. They've gotten, if any team has taken the PFF defensive line data and made good with it, it's the Patriots over the last few years. So they have a chance to do that once again with Barmore, with Ronnie Perkins. They had a big running back in Ramondre Stevenson. Cameron McGrone, the pretty good blitzing linebacker from Michigan, had a good pass rush grade or blitzing grade, however you want to put that. But it's those top 3 picks that could – obviously it comes down to Mac Jones, but those top 3 picks look all fantastic for New England.
But I mean, I said this to you before. Like, I wonder how much we just get skewed by teams that trend to just stop the halt of a guy that's sliding down the draft board.
Right.
Because there's a few times that's happened. The Vikings did it a few years ago, and you just go, oh, that's a great draft. Look at the value they got here. And you're like, yeah, but there's probably a reason that 3 of those guys consecutively were all sliding down the draft board. You know what I mean?
Becomes wisdom of the crowds as well. This is the first year an interior defensive lineman did not get drafted since 89?
So somebody told me it was 89, but I couldn't find the interior lineman in the first round in the 89 draft. Now, it's complicated by the fact that they're just called defensive end, and who the hell knows if that's like edge or interior.
Half the league was playing 34
but
back then.
Mike Clay quoted something from ESPN Stats and Info or something that was like the 60s was the last time that's happened. So I mean, you're going back at least to the 1980s, possibly to the 1960s for the last time an interior defensive lineman wasn't taken in the first round.
It's another one of those trends that we saw. Get those guys later in the draft. They're less valuable, but it's nice having them. You want to have them, but you can get them later in the draft. So we gave the Patriots an A+ because of the Mac Jones thing, and
loved it.
Take those swings at quarterback, Patriots. All right, the New York Jets. We gave them an A. I had something I didn't love from this draft. Mm-hmm. I like a lot of the players that they got, though. Zach Wilson at 2. He's the number 2 quarterback on our board, so we agree with that. They traded up from 23 to 14 to get Elijah Vera Tucker. Elijah Moore at 34. Even you're on board with that as a guy that doesn't think Elijah can play outside.
Love it.
So a lot of good things with the Jets, and a lot of just a really good offseason for the Jets from free agency all the way through the draft.
Yeah, also, they got both Michael Carters, right?
Yeah, the running back out of North Carolina and the corner out of Duke.
Yeah, the running back one in particular could make a real impact in this team as well, given what they have in the backfield. This is a great draft. Even the trade is interesting to me because I think this trade in particular is a fantastic case study for why we say you shouldn't do that, right? They traded up. They got a great player, one of the best sort of pure players in the draft, and secured him at presumably guard, though he could play right tackle, I guess, for them. And they essentially were prepared to give away those picks to make that happen and secure that guy. But the Vikings are a great example for why you just shouldn't do that, because the Vikings traded down. We thought that they would, like, if Christian Darrisaw was available for where they were picking, given how we thought the draft was going to go, they would jump all over that, immediately draft that guy, because like we were imagining a whole bunch of worlds where the Chargers take him one spot ahead, and suddenly the Vikings are sitting there looking for the 4th best tackle, who is a big drop off from the 3rd best tackle. It's like, where are they going to go? The Vikings didn't. They traded down, picked up 2 more picks, and still got the same guy, right? So they traded down, got Darrisaw anyway, and parlayed those other 2 picks into Kellen Mond, who is even if he's just a backup, it's the first backup they've taken seriously for a long time, and a guard who could potentially be a starter on that offensive line immediately, right? So they gambled that in trading down, we can still get the guy we love, who we didn't expect to even be here at this spot, and we pick up 2 more players, one of whom is probably a starter on this team. The Jets went the other way, traded up, gave away those picks just to guarantee they would get the guy who might have fallen to where they were going to go. Now, that runs contrary to the piece of information we just gave out, which is the Patriots were going to take him a spot later. Maybe they knew that. Maybe they had to make it happen because of that. But the point is, like, the Jets could easily have sat there where they were, may have got Vera Tucker anyway, and even if they hadn't, they would have had that pick and 2 more guys who could potentially have been, actually interesting players for this team.
Let's play those dominoes. What if the Jets stand pat and the Pats get
Vera Tucker.
They don't get Mac Jones. If Mac Jones becomes a stud, or if he just becomes a top 15 quarterback, the Jets are kicking themselves. If they knew that they could give Vera Tucker to the Patriots. That's something too, right? There's so many dynamics at play here. The Vikings and Bears being tied to Justin Fields. We're going to, for the next 5 to 10, however many years, that's like a thing in that division. The fact that maybe the Jets could have stayed where they were and Vera Tucker would have gone to the Patriots and Mac Jones never would have been there. We'll see if that ends up becoming a huge thing.
I mean, the other interesting thing is if the Patriots don't get Mac Jones at 15, like where does he slide to? Does he go? Does Washington take him at 19? Suddenly Washington stumble into a quarterback having done nothing?
Perhaps.
I mean, again, if Mac Jones is a stud, Washington just stumble ass backwards into the quarterback of the future because the Jets didn't trade for a guard, essentially.
But I look at it just to rehash what you said, right? The Jets and the Vikings. So the Jets have many issues on their roster, right? Mm-hmm. They're in a full rebuild mode. Already done a nice job, but they're in full rebuild. Offensive line is massive need for the Jets all across the board except left tackle. The Vikings have massive needs on the offensive line. So when the Jets traded down, and the Vikings get Christian Darrisaw left tackle, Wyatt Davis left guard, plus a free flyer on Kellen Mond. That is an incredible haul, right? Now, of course, it depends on the Darrisaw evaluation, and we had Thomas Dimitroff on the NFL Draft Show, and he didn't love Darrisaw. So if Darrisaw's not as good as we think he is, okay, fine. Right. But what if, the difference between guards, what if Wyatt Davis and Elijah Vera Tucker aren't even that far apart? That means the Vikings got a free shot that Darrisaw was good.
Yep.
They still filled that left guard spot, and they got a free shot on a Kellen Mond. So if the Jets had those things, if the Jets had Wyatt Davis at left guard and Christian Darrisaw, who they could put at right tackle and get George Fant out of the lineup.
I mean, also,
they could have come out of here with 2 starters on the offensive line that really needs it.
Plus, if you look at the players they've got in this draft, like we really like this draft. The only criticism is that they traded up and lost 2 picks to make the Vera Tucker selection. So if you look at this draft and say they've nailed evaluation, right? Now you say what they've got in the 3rd round, right? Like they kill the 2nd round, they kill the 1st round in terms of player, they kill the 4th round. What happens if in the 3rd round they had a choice of, a couple of additional players to add to the group then, right?
I mean, even if it was just Wyatt Davis, you could have had a guard to go with Darrisaw, say.
Right, but Brady Christensen went after that first 3rd round pick that they gave away. Aaron Robinson, a slot corner that could come in and be an immediate. Aleem McNeil, Milton Williams. Like these are impact playmakers potentially for the Jets that they could have easily drafted had they had those picks still, but instead they packaged them both to guarantee that they got Elijah Vera Tucker.
So we like Zach Wilson. Vera Tucker, best pass protecting guard in the draft. Could play tackle in a pinch. If they had to put him at right tackle, I'm sure he'd be fine or good enough. But I like him at guard. Elijah Moore. Now let's reset that receiving core. Corey Davis is there.
Hall of Famer.
Denzel Mims is there. Your boy. You feel better about Mims now without Darnold there and with Zach Wilson in?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hell of a lot better situation now.
Jamison Crowder, if they keep him around,
yep.
He's an excellent slot, especially when there's people around him. And now you have Elijah Moore with that speed and as a deep threat. I like where that's coming along. The big question, they didn't get corners until starting in round 5. Michael Carter, Jason Pinnock, and Brandon Eccles. All of those guys have a chance to play because the best Jets corner last year graded at 59.9, and that's Bryce Hall. Throw Hall into that mix. So they're attacking corner with volume, just not high-value volume as far as the draft goes. But that's the biggest question mark on this Jets roster right now. You can't fix everything in one draft, but that's like the one huge glaring need that they have not been able to address really this offseason.
It is. The good news is that they have a bunch of young players in that group and they're coming to a completely new system, a system that has previous for essentially taking a bunch that everyone said needed a dramatic upgrade and just making them better.
Remind everybody because
the 49ers,
yeah.
Robert Saleh coming from the 49ers.
19.
Yeah, we looked at that 49ers depth chart and you're like, wow, they desperately need cornerback help. And that was the narrative all the way through the offseason. And the 49ers the whole way through were basically like, no, chill. We like the guys we have. They're going to get better this year. The answers to the problem are already on the roster. Now, you can make that case for the Jets, but the talent has been selected a lot lower down. Like Bryce Hall was a 5th-round pick, albeit a guy who maybe had more talent than that. Lamar Jackson, the cornerback, went undrafted, right? He didn't even get drafted.
And then 2 fifth-rounders this year in Michael Carter, 2 from Duke, 2.
Yes.
And Jason Pinnock.
Right.
So both of those, 3 fifth-round corners all battling there.
And Javelin Guidry, is that how you say that guy's second name?
Gidry?
He also
Gidry, the lefty.
Okay. He also went undrafted. Like, these were guys that people liked in the draft process, Jackson and him, but they went undrafted. So, like, it's harder to buy into the idea that those guys are the answer just because the draft stock didn't reflect that. But it's potentially the case.
Austin, I mean, it's all 5th and 6th rounders. Like, their entire 2D is 5th and 6th rounders in undrafted Lamar Jackson.
Now, it's not to say I don't like some of those players, but it's a lot more of a stretch than it was with the 49ers, who had a bunch of 2nd and 3rd rounders on the roster.
And, you know, by contrast, you look at what they've done at safety. They bring back Marcus May, sign LaMarcus Joyner. Last year, spent a 3rd on Ashton Davis, and then Hamza Nasir-Eldin comes over from Florida State. Could be a tight end eraser, big guy placed, but they've invested far more at safety than they have corner. So you make a good point. Robert Saleh's worked magic before in the cornerback room. We'll see if he can do that one more time.
They're also a great team to do that. Let's grab a post-compensatory pick deadline cornerback, right?
Yeah. And Sherman loves Saleh. We'll see if he wants to go. I don't know if he wants to go play for the rebuilding Jets, but they do have that connection. Sherman's never played not in that system as well. So
true.
Feels like if you're handicapping Sherman's landing spot, it has to be the Jets, the Niners again, or the Raiders, or somewhere where he knows the coach playing the same system.
But there's guys like Casey Hayward still on the market. You know, there's some high-name free agents that are still out there that you might want to add to that group of guys that were 5th round and below.
Yeah. Either way, love the way the Jets are going. Love what they're doing. Gave them an A for the draft. Added a ton of talent both in free agency and the draft. One of the best off seasons by our standards here at PFF. Got to tell you about our friends over at DraftKings, though. The hits literally keep on coming from one boxing event to the next. They grow in excitement and anticipation, and this weekend is no different, with 2 of the sport's most respected fighters stepping into the ring Saturday night. There's no better place to get in on all the action than with DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app. To celebrate this weekend's huge event, listen closely. DraftKings Sportsbook is offering new users the opportunity to get 55-1 odds on either main event fighter to win this weekend's fight. So download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code PFF when you sign up. For a limited time, all new users can bet $1 to win $55 on this weekend's main event. That's right, DraftKings Sportsbook is going all out for new users by offering them the chance to win $55 when placing a bet of $1 on this weekend's big fight. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook, must be 21 or older. New Jersey, Indiana, and Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. A gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or in Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. I don't know what happened to the other states, but it's just New Jersey, Indiana, and Pennsylvania for this weekend. If you're listening right now, Draft 30 still alive for just a few more hours. Draft 30, 30% off all PFF subscriptions, Edge or Elite. I still suggest get your Elite subscription because you will be thanking me come July and August when you're drafting for your fantasy team and you have the very best fantasy tools on the market. 365 days of access. So go do it. Draft 30. Also, special shout out. We just keep breaking records here on the PFF NFL podcast for more listeners, more millions of listeners, and we just appreciate everybody for doing it. It's been an incredible draft season. We're not done yet. Halfway through all of our draft reviews, but tell your friends. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just subscribe to everything and keep sending us those screenshots. I will have more winners on future episodes. If you subscribe to the Daily and the NFL Podcast, send us those screenshots at nflpodcast@pff.com. Sound good?
Yep.
One last pitch for the Afro. Where do people do that?
To my Twitter. It's the pinned tweet. It's help liberate Steve's fro and donate. We're up to $420 right now of a $1,000 goal. Everybody wants to see the hilarity that is Steve's fro live on the podcast.
At PFF_Sam. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We will be back later in the week. Still figuring out when they're going to drop, but you will get 2 more draft reviews later in the week. See you guys.